As chaos encroaches on my once peaceful neighborhood, I must choose silence in fear or rise against the shadows of lawlessness threatening to consume us all. Will I be enough? That night, deep in my gut, surged the savage urge to fight back against the dereliction pulsing through my neighborhood. I paced the dimly lit confines of my living room, fueled by a potent blend of adrenaline and indignation. How had my sanctuary turned into a chaotic exhibition of lawlessness? Outside, the squatters seemed to administer a sort of bastardized carnival, complete with raucous laughter that mocked my seething frustration. Got to give them credit for the audacity. They held their impromptu meeting, as if the streets were open season for anyone with an ounce of swagger and a dash of disregard for the civilized. My fists clenched, my mind raced, and I could almost hear the faint voice of Mrs. Jenkins squeaking out her wisdom about standing up against tyranny. It was now or never. With a fervent determination, I pulled out the old filing cabinet that had gone neglected in the corner of my home office. Papers flew in all directions as I rummaged through my arsenal of neighborhood complaints, police reports, and testimonials penned by neighbors shaken by their own brush with panic. I was documenting the grown-up equivalent of slaying dragons with a keyboard. From the oblivious city leaders who merrily perch atop their ivory towers to the harrowing tales of my fellow residents, the evidence mounted like a well-manicured stack of damning truth. Each story was a bullet of rage, each incident a glaring code violation in the tangled mess that was our community. I would expose them. I would make them squirm. The winds of change were carrying me straight into battle, and I was fully armed. The first stop in my little crusade of justice was my old friend, Ralph Peterson, the local journalist with a nose for the scandalous and a penchant for snarky headlines. He had often joked about how my neighborhood had become a real-life soap opera, and thanked the heavens for that. As I burst into the coffee shop where Ralph habitually slumped over his laptop, his brow furrowed and eyes widened in alarm. "What's wrong with you, Ev? You look like someone set your hair on fire." Without a hint of restraint, I launched into my diatribe, each word dripping with ferocity, as I regaled him with tales of chaos erupting on our once pristine streets. "You're the only one who can help me shine a light on this mess and make it sparkle like a freshly polished turd," I exclaimed, feeling the power of my righteous fury. "But Evelyn, is this really newsworthy? You know I typically cover fashion faux pas and food truck controversies, not urban warfare," he chuckled, sipping his lukewarm coffee like it contained the elixir of life. If that was all he had to say, I was ready to grab the nearest plate and hurl it at him. "It's about time you reflect on what's really horrible in this world, Ralph. The squatter circus is an embarrassment. People are scared, homes are being invaded, and we deserve better than this chaotic dumpster fire." He finally sat up straight, eyebrows raised, undoubtedly realizing I was dead serious. Okay, I see your point," he capitulated with a slight smirk. "Let's make it Sunday's headline. Civic breakdown. Local woman fights back against havoc. And who knows, maybe we could finally get the city council some attention for a decent house cleaning." With the promise of Ralph's pen and platform behind me, I decided it was time to rally the troops. I knocked on every door on my block, metaphorical battle cry ringing in my ears. Some neighbors, still dazed and confused, glanced at me as if I were proposing an outrageous conspiracy theory. Others, like Mrs. Jenkins, bright-eyed and plucky in her vivid sweater, a soft shield against the weight of our reality, joined my cause without hesitation, her world-weary words filling each echoing silence. "We must stand together, dear Evelyn. You know they want us divided and afraid." Her spirit was infectious, and with her in my corner, I knew we could finally make some noise. A week had passed since my initial bout of righteous indignation, and with Mrs. Jenkins at my side, we'd firmly gathered our forces. One evening, with a hearty mix of anticipation and anxiety coursing through my veins, we assembled countless residents for a meeting that felt electrified with possibility. The community center was a stark reminder of everything we could reclaim. The flickering lights overhead casting a warm glow over tired faces that had only known adversity lately. One by one, voices emerged from the crowd, each one more emboldened than the last. Each testimony was threaded with fear and resolve, as we painted a stark picture of our shared denouncement against the negligence of city leaders. As we collectively stoked the flames of determination, enthusiasm surged like veins of molten lava, ready to drop a mountain of truth right on the doorstep of the city officials. Perhaps a part of me was still scared, still rattling with uncertainty, but I wrapped myself in the cloak of solidarity, channeling the hard-won wisdom of Mrs. Jenkins. Those careless leaders in their lofty offices and padded suits would soon feel the weight of our fury. After all, it was the furious heart of a community that could ignite change. The city could neither ignore us nor sweep us back under the rug any longer. Was it possible that in this swirling tempest, we might just claim victory against the chaos? As the clock struck 7 one fateful Wednesday, our rage simmered, launched into the atmosphere like a rocket, fueled by crisis and the impending issues haunting my neighborhood. We had set our community meeting in the heart of the local community center, a building that had so often embodied warmth and safety. Now it felt more like a fortress, a battleground where the forces of chaos and corruption would clash. A wave of residents flowed through the door, their faces reflecting the weariness of constant battle. It was heartening and terrifying in equal measure. Half my mind screamed for more than just a pep rally. We needed a full-on uprising. With the weathered blueprint of our neighborhood flashing in my mind, I seized the moment, sweeping my gaze over the assembly of neighbors, each pair of eyes burnished with a fierce yearning for change. My voice thrummed with urgency as I kicked off the meeting with a passionate speech, punctuated by wild gesticulations that could have given any Broadway star a run for their money. We don't need to just talk about our troubles. We need to brandish them like weapons, I hollered, pacing like a lioness ready to pounce. With each step we take, we'll draw the attention of the city leaders sleeping at the wheel, their elaborate dreams laced with our despair. Enough is enough. An electrifying buzz filled the room as the energy escalated, folks leaning in like they were watching a high-stakes boxing match. Mrs. Jenkins, providing her own brand of soft support, held my hand tightly under the table, giving me strength as I spoke about sharing our testimonies widely, making a case so strong that even the blinkered councilman wouldn't have a choice but to notice us. From the back of the room, a voice piped up. But what if they don't take us seriously? What if this is all a waste? It was Frank, a neighbor whose once golden optimism had dulled under the shadows of neglect. His doubt triggered a flicker of frustration in me. Here we stood, ready to take back our lives, and here was a man stuck in limbo. Frank, my friend, why not just tape a "please ignore us" sign to your forehead? The collective laughter echoed, momentarily lifting the weight off everyone's shoulders. This wasn't just about shouting into the void. We were crafting a tapestry of truth, and that takes courage. If we want to be noticed, we must create noise so loud it shatters their tranquil slumbers. Frank flushed, the fire in his eyes reigniting, and I seized the moment, coaxing out his legendary enthusiasm with each additional point. As we drew to the crux of the meeting, planning our protests, petitions, and public awareness campaigns, I glanced over at Mrs. Jenkins, her eyes sparkling with that same fire igniting within me. She stood and shared a story about the good old days, when our streets shimmered like newly polished diamonds, bustling with life and laughter. "We had a community back then, dear ones," she said, her voice trembling with nostalgia, "where a neighbor could lend a cup of sugar without fear of it being a shortcut to chaos. We need that back." I watched as her words carved a nostalgic path through the crowd, igniting laughter, sighs, and voices, rallying in agreement. Miss Jenkins, our gentle warrior with a rainbow of cardigans, was sparking a fire underneath every single person in the room, and it filled me with a sense of unshakable hope that I hadn't even realized had been simmering beneath the surface. A decision snapped into focus, like a picture locking into its frame. More than a mere protest, we needed an event, one that would harness our collective fury and project it out into the world where our city leaders resided, cocooned in their plush offices, unfazed by our plights. I mused on the irony. Our little band of misfit revolutionaries planning a coup d'etat against negligence. Ladies and gentlemen, what if we create an event, an old-fashioned rally, complete with signs, your best grandmotherly recipes, and more sarcasm than the lawmakers could digest in one sitting? The laughter erupted anew, and I smiled as coiled energy permeated the air. There it was, the sweet fragrance of rebellion. Fast forward into the following weeks, and we were running like a well-oiled machine, well, maybe more like a slightly rusted contraption, but a machine nonetheless. Posters peppered every lamppost, inviting the neighborhood to our rally, where we could finally yell loudly enough to shatter their deluded little bubbles. Suddenly, every person from the corner bodega to the laundromat became a stakeholder in our grand performance. The anticipation of our showdown surged through the streets. Beneath this humor-laden facade lurked the gritty underbelly of risk. After all, facing the grimy mess left by city officials was one thing, but standing eye to eye with Rico Torres and his crew, who thrived on the chaos, was another. Yet, I knew that if battling the bureaucratic meltdown felt like gladiator games, I'd strap on my virtual armor and charge into the arena. Finally, the day arrived, momentum carrying us like a tidal wave crashing onto the shores of injustice. As I stood mid-crowd, our makeshift placards waving like banners of truth, I caught sight of dignitaries finally peeling themselves from their comfortable leather chairs, striding purposefully toward us, ill-prepared for the storm. You think you can just ignore us as if we're merely extra roles in their poorly scripted drama? I thought, a smirk playing on my lips as the adrenaline washed over me. This was the moment of reckoning, the perfect cocktail of righteous fury and sharpened ambition brewing a delicious blend of power. The battle for our neighborhood was well underway, and with each passing moment, I dared them to dismiss us once more. Would they stand silent? Or would they finally uphold their end of the community bargain? As we gathered for the rally, I marveled at the eclectic array of faces around me, each story a thread woven into the rich fabric of our community. The stark contrast of vibrant costumes and muffled anger brought a tumultuous energy I could hardly contain. Children giggled, wrapped in their parents' arms, while others brandished placards that read, "Our neighborhood, our rights," and "Time for change." Every sign told a tale of resilience, a narrative of hope that rippled through the air like electric charge. Yet beneath this jubilant surface lay the unmistakable anxiety of impending conflict. A primal fear hovered, whispering of the looming presence of Rico and his crew. I could almost see the bloodthirsty gleam in their predatory eyes, ready to pounce on any sign of weakness. But this was our moment, attracting attention like moths to a flame. We were about to shine. Just then, as if summoned by the cacophony of protesters, Rico appeared, flanked by his loyal pack of thugs. Their indifference was palpable, steeping the atmosphere in tension while they sauntered like wolves entering a den of sheep. I felt a surge of insatiable rage bubbling up inside of me, encouraging me to hold my ground. Though he tried to impose silence, I knew I had an army behind me, a fiery chorus grown even louder by their frustration. So silly of them to think they could browbeat us into submission, I thought, even managing a smirk as I locked eyes with Rico. He was determined to assert dominance, but what did he expect? We had spent weeks fortifying our spirits, transforming discomfort into an unyielding desire for change. With a collective breath, we turned our backs to his intimidation, refocusing our chants toward the faces of dignitaries creeping around the edges for a glimpse of unfiltered courage. Stand tall, stand proud, our voices won't be drowned. The crowd roared, a symphony of defiance resonating far beyond the asphalt jungle. The horrified expressions on the faces of the city officials sharpened my resolve, revealing just how unaccustomed they were to actual democracy in action. Here we stand, spitting truth like cannon fire. My heart raced, each beat synchronizing with the pulse of the crowd. Still, the shadow of Rico loomed menacingly behind me like a thunderous storm. I twisted to face him and shouted, "You may sow chaos, but our seed will sprout into justice." The wind whipped through the air, carrying my words like a banner fluttering in the breeze, displaying our collective strength. We were no longer victims. Our passion turned the city's apathy into a nervous dance. As the dignitaries took their positions, I felt an anxiety jolt through me. Were they finally looking at us, or merely staring at a peculiar spectacle? I could see their condescending smiles and polite nods. They would try to placate us with hollow promises, but I was ready to counteract their prattle with grit and raw audacity. Let them come, I thought fervently, remembering the stakes behind my determination. With each interpolation of their empty platitudes, I imagined myself piercing their hearts with a verbal rapier, cutting through their pretensions, and leaving them stunned in the wake of our resolve. I'd skimmed over bureaucratic lingo long enough to know their weak spots. I'd just need to draw them out during our electric showdown. Spotting Mrs. Jenkins at the edge of the crowd, her bravery almost eclipsed by the vibrant chaos, I felt a jolt of courage. Let her witness this moment, I muttered under my breath as I surged forward, ready to intercept the dignitaries before they could go back to their retreat behind polished mahogany desks. You might dismiss me, but never our resilience, I shouted, igniting a fire behind my voice, as if I was turning the very air into a weapon. You think we will slink away quietly while Rico rides high on the misery you've allowed to flourish? We are the very fabric of this community, and our threads are tightly woven. There was an uproar of approval, a chorus that thrummed in unison as I stood boldly, taking that fearless leap into the chasm of confrontation. In the aftermath of my declaration, the dignitaries froze, momentarily nonplussed by the raw force we exuded. I could almost feel the gears turning in their heads, struggling to reconfigure their strategy. See, the real world isn't just palatable tea and fine china, is it? I thought, chuckling inwardly at their squirming discomfort. It was a stark contrast to the lives they lived night after night, huddled in safety while we battled for our corner of the universe. With the weight of our community on my shoulders, I called for silence in my voice before riding the reverberating momentum. Will the lives of families always be treated like mere footnotes in your ledger? Or will you take a stand? The tension in the air was electric, and I was certain that hadn't we breached their fortress of comfort, we would break it. Just then, one of the city officials stepped forward, the look of practiced indifference crumbling into alarm. We hear your concerns, but where exactly do you suggest we allocate funds? There it was, the magic phrase that would illuminate their willful ignorance. Why not crack open your luxury budget? Or does the thought of dollars spent on a community's safety send a chill through your greedy spines? Laughter erupted again. The crowd was on fire, and as I witnessed that fire catch across the sea of people, I was reminded that laughter is just as potent a weapon as righteousness. With every syllable I spoke, I felt myself locked into a rhythmic dance with my community, each step resonating with our unified determination. As the rally slinked into yet another chant, I glanced behind me at the cheers cascading like waves, each voice breathing life back into the spirit of our neighborhood. It was clear. We weren't merely a nuisance to be ignored. We were a force to be reckoned with. This melange of voices just might create the seismic ripple that would shake the foundations of complacency. Would the dignity of our collective voices finally resonate loudly enough to ensure change? The answer sat bubbling beneath the surface, waiting for me to call on it as our neighborhood's fight for justice began. Why not crack open your luxury budget? Or does the thought of dollars spent on a community's safety send a chill through your greedy spines? I hurled the words at the city officials, slick and sharp, as the crowd erupted into raucous laughter that reverberated through the bitter air like a siren's song. The laughter, oh, that delicious weapon, shattered their carefully constructed bubble of indifference. The assembled crowd was a roaring wave, each voice adding fuel to the flames of our determination, like a tide rising against the jagged rocks of bureaucracy. This is what they don't get. Behind their tinted windows and polished presentations, they're shielded from the very decay they fostered, I thought, reveling momentarily in their visible discomfort. It was a sweet sensation, vindicating and irresistible. Rico lurked on the periphery, his brow furrowed with fury as he observed the momentum spiraling out of his control. I relished it. Those ambitious eyes, once sharp with intent to dominate, now glinted with uncertainty, a predator unsure of its next move. The revelation ignited a wicked smile across my face. Look at him squirm, the king without a crown, I mused internally, full of exhilarating bravado. What a spectacle to witness. I had wielded our unity like a sword, slicing through his de facto reign. And here on the precipice of possibility, I realized we might just be the architects of our own destiny. With Rico floundering in the chaos we had brewed, his grip was finally slipping. The city officials huddled together, whispering anxiously like kids caught in the act with their hands in the cookie jar. Ah, the beautiful irony. Here they were, the architects of our despair, pantomiming deliberation, while the very community they had neglected rose like a phoenix from the ashes of apathy. "Time to turn the screw, Evelyn," I reminded myself as I stepped forward, my heart pounding with the electric thrill each chant raised. "This is your moment." With a flourish of my arm and a voice that trembled with fierce energy, I shouted, "If we band together, if we refuse to bow before your empty promises, we will rewrite this narrative." The crescendo swelled among my neighbors, swelling like the tide before a storm, a revolution bubbling just beneath the surface. But it wasn't only Rico's expression that ignited my fury. The vacant stares of city leaders struck me like ice water, soaking the fire from our chants. They were not simply indifferent, they were complicit, wrapped up in their cozy ignorance, while we fought for scraps of stability. "Where's the funding you promised? Where are the resources for our schools while we watch drug deals unravel next to our children's playground?" My voice rose, layered with contempt, as if I could burn the hypocrisy away with sheer indignation. The sharp intake of breath from Mrs. Jenkins behind me sent another shiver racing through my spine. They're old enough to remember the days when promises meant something, I thought, feeling her life force entwined with our struggle, urging me to push further, to break the chains tightening around our community. Echoes of memories flew through my mind, reminding me of the summer block parties and children laughing on those very playgrounds, the laughter now overshadowed by lingering threat and neglect. "Why don't we take a stroll down memory lane, huh? None of you were around then, and I doubt you care enough to conjure it now," I bellowed, my eyes sparking as I dove further into their fragility. The crowd united in a swell of cheers, a tempest roaring with the ancient strength of its lineage. "Do you remember when the only concern was which ice cream truck had the best tunes?" I continued, driven by nostalgia laced with outrage. With every word, I could hear the snapping of their chains, the defiance taking root like stubborn weeds pushing through concrete. Bigger homes, bigger mansions, but for what? To sit on top of your piles of cash and ignore the pleas of hard-working families? I spoke directly at the city officials, my tone mocking and frigid like an unyielding winter wind. They shifted uneasily, and I could see their fortress of privilege quaking at the edges. Our resilience isn't just a simple speech. It's us pushing back, a full-on hurricane inviting you to change or drown. My voice crescendoed, wrapping around the gathering throng, lifting each heart on its winds, my very essence swirling in harmony with their cries. Let's take a moment to remember the power we wield together. I knew in this moment that shutting us out meant mute acceptance of their defeat. Then, like a miracle in the brewing chaos, I caught a glimpse of a camera flashing. The media arriving. I could see hopeful sparks fly in the squinted eyes of my neighbors as reporters swept into the fray, capturing our brand of bravery that was ready to spark headlines. This is it. This is where it changes. My heart raced as I sensed the momentum pushing forward like a relentless wave crashing against dry land. If we can attract the media, we can create a narrative that can't be ignored, I thought, fueled by an adrenaline rush that surged through my veins, making me feel invincible. This just became our story, an unfiltered documentary of every single person who cares enough to stand, shouting for justice. With the audience swelling and the media now broadcasting our struggle, I felt our voices reaching new heights, intertwining and colliding like fireworks sparking across the night sky. Every chant became a rallying cry, each individual part of a greater orchestra playing the anthem of change. Will they even see us? Will they hear it this time? I pondered as the dignitaries shifted uncertainly. This was no longer about dismissing our pleas or letting Rico tighten his grip. It was a full-on invasion of their illusion of control. As the rally transformed into a brilliant crusade for justice, I finally dared to think about the dawn that awaited us, the gritty, empowering light that shone just beyond this moment of chaos. Would we break through the chains to redefine our neighborhood, or was this the prelude to a new chapter of resilience? The wind howled like a banshee tearing through our makeshift barricade as the atmosphere crackled with tension, vibrating with raw emotion that could only be described as revolutionary. The huddled mass of my fellow residents buzzed around me, eyes gleaming like rusty nails in the sunlight, caught up in the fervor of taking control back from the ones who had taken too much. I could see the stillness in the city officials' faces morph into confused panic. They were witnessing the kind of chaos they hadn't anticipated when they wrote their complacent, bureaucratic reports. "They've played us for fools long enough," I seethed silently, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. In that chaotic moment, the stifling fear that had gripped my neighborhood slipped away, leaving behind indignant power and electrifying hope. Rico, all swagger and bravado, and yet utterly unprepared for the combined fury of neighborhood pride, stood frozen as I shouted, "You think this is a game? You play with lives here. You make deals in back rooms while we choke under the oppressive weight of your negligence." I couldn't help but delight in the discomfort etched across his face like a grotesque mask. The winds of change were blowing, and there he was, the literal embodiment of our collective struggle now rendered powerless, watching as his empire of fear crumbled before his very eyes. "You've sown discord," I thought, "and now it's time for the harvest. Our resilience will drown your underhanded games." Fueled by that thought, I felt myself transform from a scared homeowner into a spearhead, firming my resolve, leading the charge for justice. The media thronged around us like moths to an open flame, and I could feel the excitement crackling in the air like static electricity. Every flick of a camera, every scribble of a pen was a powerful reminder that our voices would echo far beyond the fence lines of our neighborhood. This isn't just about local drama anymore, I realized, bubbling with excitement, clutching the brooms and rakes that transformed into banners of our fight. This is our story, our right to claim the narrative. As I leaned into the chaos, I enforced the truth that we were all part of a bigger thing, something beautiful and fierce. Together, we were shattering the silence that had smothered our community into submission and writing a symphony of resilience in its place. From the back of the crowd, Mrs. Jenkins's voice rang out, her tremor both warm and steadfast. "Remember how we painted the playground murals together? How laughter echoed where silence now lurks?" It broke through my fervent battle cry, and soon she was joined by others, memories pouring forth like the most precious nectar, sweetening the bitterness in our throats. We stood shoulder to shoulder against storms, carving our histories into every nook and cranny of this neighborhood, she exclaimed, each nod of the crowd a reminder of our roots tangled deep in these very streets. With one hand lifting my broom like an ancient herald's banner, I joined in, rallying over the stirring undertones of nostalgia that embraced us as a living tapestry of strength. Words turned into spells, weaving through the crowd as we shared tales of the neighborhood's brighter days, tales that shook the very foundations of compliance. Our children deserve more than shadowy threats and hollow promises. I rallied on, every word igniting with fervor, making the officials squirm like they were caught in a barrage of arrows. For the laughter that filled the playgrounds and the community that thrived, we demand accountability. I opened my arms wide, feeling the warmth of hands clasping together, unity transforming our individual voices into a resounding symphony. Each clapping hand meticulously reinforcing the notion that we would not suffer quietly, nor bend to intimidation. Suddenly the crowd erupted into a furious chorus of chants, a tidal wave of voices crashing against the pillars of authority frantically painted in disinterest. Justice for our community. Justice for our children. The chants surged, each repetition a potent reminder that reclaiming our home was no longer a distant dream. It was a pulsating heartbeat in the fabric of our collective resolve. This, I thought, is what unity feels like. The city officials might have had their bureaucratic armor, but we had the strength of our shared stories, our determination forged anew, hotter and sharper than any sword they could wield. Each voice in the crowd served as a reminder that we refused to be mere background actors in the tragic comedy they'd written. The final strokes of my rallying cry felt like an explosion, my voice lifting above our united front. "Are you ready to join us in standing against indifference?" I shouted, and the crowd erupted in cheers louder than any storm I'd ever known. I positioned myself at the forefront, adrenaline fixing my gaze on the anxious faces of the city leaders, who were now cornered by the swell of our righteous anger. Their eyes darted, panic stained with the realization that the script had flipped, and it mattered little where they chose to hide. It was evident they could feel the tremors of change rattling the very core of their complacency. "This isn't just our neighborhood anymore. It's a cause," I yelled, staring straight into the furious eyes of Rico, whose bravado crumpled with each tick of the seconds, and I reveled in the satisfaction of that slow unraveling. And just when I thought we'd reached the apex of this electrifying uprising, I witnessed the media capturing it all, their lenses focused intently on our faces embossed with determination. The realization swept through me like a refreshing breeze. We were not just fighting for our homes. We were igniting a movement that could echo through the city and beyond. This is the moment where our voices finally pierce the veil of those indifferent to our suffering. My heart raced, the anticipation palpable in the air, thick with hope and determination. With every single beat, I felt it. This was the beginning of a new era, where we would no longer be silent, where our vibrant voices would overpower the cacophony of neglect and indifference. Would we finally restore the dignity our neighborhood had lost? Or was this just the start of an even bigger battle ahead? The noise of our marching chants bounced off the crumbling brick walls of our neighborhood, a symphony of defiance that rang out like a battle horn, announcing our claim to the streets they had tried to erase. "Justice for our community, justice for our children," echoed back at us, as if the very bricks of the buildings absorbed our cries to amplify them. I could see the city officials now, scrambling like cornered rats, their haughty expressions twisted into incredulous shock. Their carefully curated illusion of control was now nothing but dust motes in the morning light, blown away by our collective fury. The camera crews scurried about like a pack of hungry wolves, ready to feast on the dysfunction at City Hall, and the panic of the officials silent beneath a rain of passionate indignation. Did they truly underestimate us? Or was it sheer arrogance that blinded them to the growing storm in our hearts? Caught in the fervor, I felt my chest swell with pride as we emerged as a living, breathing creature fueled by righteous anger, a relentless tide clawing back against the injustices wrought by a complacent government. In that moment, I could almost hear the cries of previous generations, the echoes of Mrs. Jenkins's stories weaving through our chants, blending her lingering past with our fierce present. "Remember the summer we painted that mural on the old library wall?" she had shared just the other day, a wistful smile gracing her lips. "We painted hope. It will shine brighter than any neglect." I could envision the splashes of colors against the drabness of our community, and now it felt like the mural was coming alive again, flickering in the sunlight as if it resonated with our determination. That day, we weren't just fighting back. We were reigniting the very soul of our neighborhood. And then there was Rico, a schemer belching toxic air into our community while carrying nothing but arrogance in his pocket. There he stood, the self-styled king of chaos, shattered and bewildered in the wake of our unity, his rough demeanor dampened by the tide of our collective roar. How sweet it was to witness the unmistakable dread morphing across his face, as the walls he built through fear crumbled like stale bread beneath relentless rain. I relished the sight. He was a high school bully caught with his pants down and no power to manipulate. Though his intimidation tactics had once thrived in the shadows, he now stood at the center of the spotlight, exposed and vulnerable as we crushed the facade he operated behind. Who was laughing now? The sheer absurdity of it all sent a rush of exhilaration through me, and I found myself grinning in satisfaction, ready for a reckoning. But it wasn't just my own jubilant sense of triumph that propelled my heart to victory. It was the sight of my neighbors shaking off their apathy and rising together that warmed my spirit. Voices once hushed by fear now flourished with conviction, each face lit by the glow of empowerment. "This isn't just our block," I shouted, pointing into the masses. "This is our lifeblood. Our children deserve better than to live in the shadows of Rico's reign. Together we rise." The joy reflected in their eyes was contagious, and soon my rallying call morphed into an anthem, echoing from neighbor to neighbor. I could see Mrs. Jenkins wedged within the spirited throng, no longer merely recounting the whispers of the past, but now woven into the fabric of our present endeavor. Her presence built a bridge between the history we cherished and the future we demanded. Yet the drama wasn't over. Our collective power was met with a desperate show of cornered authority. City officials, in their designer suits and polished shoes, began to engage in a stumbling dance of damage control. their rehearsed speeches now tarnished by the stench of raw fear, irreversibly etched on their faces. "Are you really going to stand there and feign ignorance?" I shouted, breaking through the clamor. It was a visceral moment, and the silence that followed was enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. They tried to play at indifference amidst the chaos, but we had outgrown their ritual, with a passion that could not be subdued. My heart thundered. This was it, our chance to hold them accountable, to expose their negligence. As I leaned forward, the crowd surged behind me, a wave of adrenaline, igniting our voices with newfound fervor. "Look around you. Do you still think we're mere statistics? We're the heart and soul of this community. You can't shove us aside like we're nothing. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of our fight." Each word struck the air like a hammer against iron, clangs reverberating through the sea of humanity. The officials squirmed, glancing at each other for reassurances that were no longer present. "We demand a seat at this table," I continued, pushing myself into the forefront of this revolution. "We're not going to back down until we see real change. No more smoke and mirrors, and no more empty promises." As the sun ascended higher into the sky, its golden rays illuminating our passionate muzzling of corruption, the chants transformed from mere words into powerful declarations of intent. We were bursting forth from the depths of our despair, forging the unbreakable bonds of unity needed to incinerate the shadows. With each heartbeat, we drew nearer not just to justice for our neighborhood, but to a reckoning for all the countless communities suffering beneath the weight of indifference. Was this fire we ignited going to sputter out or burn brighter, lighting the way ahead? Through this chaos, one thing became clear. Together, we were an unstoppable force, and nothing would hold us back now. The city officials stood huddled together, their backs against an old brick wall, peering at our relentless crowd as though we were a pack of wild animals ready to pounce. I couldn't help but delight in their discomfort. Their polished suits looked painfully out of place against the rough backdrop of our neighborhood. Here they were, slick urbanites trying to control a raging tempest of discontent boiling just a few feet away. With each beat of our drums and faces drawn tight with determination, we made clear that neither their grandiose headlines nor their spun tales of community engagement would shield them from the consequences of their negligence. Just then, Rico, who had been hiding in the periphery like a cockroach, afraid of the light, parsed through the crowd, a devil caught in a game far beyond his control. The significance of his presence weighed down on me like a thick fog. He was everything we fought against, a serpent that slithered from the darkness hoping for a safe corner to nestle in. But there was no hiding here. Fueled by the afterglow of adrenaline coursing through the masses, I stepped closer to the officials, relishing the moment. "You want to tell us about programs you're launching to what? Make our lives better? Spare us the patronizing charade," I barked, channeling all those pent-up voices of my neighbors' fears and anxieties into each word. The officials squirmed. Their rehearsed smiles faltered as my words sliced through their armor, exposing the fraying fabric of confidence they wore like a talisman. I recognized the fear reflected in their eyes, a visceral reaction that dripped with the realization that this was no ordinary protest, a well-orchestrated theater of apathy. We were a symphony of chaos, orchestrated by the cries of so many who had felt the sting of neglect. United, we demanded recognition, and they were waking up to this awakening with dread and disbelief splashed across their surprised faces. A chorus of voices erupted from the crowd in response, a tidal wave of disbelief echoing off the walls. "Promises, promises. Those are just empty words," they called, the chant gaining momentum with each repetition. I found myself swept away by their passion, the air electric with rage and renewed hope. It was as if the very ground beneath us began to tremble at the weight of our collective indignation. I leaned in, towering over the officials, their power growing weaker with every chant. "You've failed our community. We will not be silenced by your empty rhetoric." My voice rang out clear and fierce, as if I were summoning the spirits of our neighborhood, past and present, to reclaim their voices too. The scene felt so cinematic, so surreal. I could almost hear the soundtrack crescendoing beneath our fervor, our united rebellion shaking the foundations of their complacency. Just then, Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward, clutching her cardigan tightly around her frail shoulders. I noticed her resolute expression juxtaposed with her aging frame, but it ignited more fire within me. The future isn't just ours to shape, it's a promise to the generations that come after us, she declared, and her words rang out through the crowd like a triumphant bell. Do you want the children climbing these streets to be robbed of their dreams? She continued, and I could feel her spirit wrapping around us, fueling our collective angst, solidifying our purpose. The backdrop of our little corner of the world transformed from neglect to community spirit. Mrs. Jenkins was offering inspiration steeped in wisdom, reminding every new soul rising against injustice of the shoulder on which they stood. The crowd roared, our shared history alive, and it was more than just noise. It was a battle cry. But even in that triumphant moment, I could feel the twisted figure of Rico lurking, the baleful shadow in our midst. There was a palpable unease when I gazed into his hardened eyes. They echoed a feral calculation that told me he wouldn't just retreat into shadows. We were acutely aware of his reckless disregard for our fears, and while we bonded in our fight for justice, he stood ready to manipulate the tide, waiting to strike from the dark edges of the crowd. "This isn't over. Mark my words," he shouted, his voice a venomous hiss that sliced through our jubilation. An unmistakable odium flooded my guts, twisting my stomach with the knowledge that this fight was far from finished, and his gymnastic abilities of evasion and intimidation were not to be underestimated. I met his gaze head-on, refusing to be intimidated. We weren't backing down. We were just growing stronger. With that, I raised my hand, instinctively understanding I bore the hopes of all who wanted a better tomorrow. "We're not afraid of you," I screamed, as Rico recoiled at the caustic defiance radiating from the heart of our community. "This ends here. No more living in fear while you rule over us with terror. We deserve better, and we will take it." Each word pounded like a war drum echoing through our neighborhood. We were warriors mounted on a foundation of unity, and in that electrifying moment, I could pitch my voice against the cacophony of Rico's hollow threats. For the first time, the winds were shifting in our favor, and it filled me with a fierce determination that we could wrestle back our lives from his iron grip. As I looked into the faces of my neighbors, feeling their energy reverberate off of mine, I understood that from this day forward, we would no longer tolerate being pawns in someone else's game. And so, as the sun cast its fierce glow, illuminating our collective courage, the banner of our truth unfurled, and I felt the boundless potential of this moment. "Let's show them what it means to be a community," I barked, feeding off the excitement in the swirling air around us. Our chant intensified, fervor rising like flames licking up towards freedom. Together we rise. Together we shine. Every shake of my fist and pulse of pounding hearts revealed our unyielding promise to reclaim the streets, ignite the once dampened dreams around us, and rise above the shadows of our neighborhood struggles. Through laughter and tears, whispers of change were blossoming into an unbreakable will, and I knew deep down this was only the beginning of something monumental. Would we manifest the dream we fought for, or would we remain forever shackled by the ghosts of complacency? Together, rallied under a banner woven with pride and intent, we were determined to find out.